Okay, so here you can see I've already siliconed around the eyes and on the seams. And I've done some sanding, and I use a very light grit 600 sandpaper. If there is a thick spot or a blurb, I will use stuff that's more around 350 first, and then go back over it with that. And did a pretty detailed explanation on how to use the silicone on a video that I did previous. It was a utility belt pouch build in 2 parts, and it shows the siliconing process pretty in depth there, but I'm going to go through it real quick here. Now, the silicone I use is by a brand named DAP, and it's called Alex Fast Dry Acrylic Silicone with Latex. It comes in a tube that goes in a caulking gun. Now, I took it all out and put it in here because I use my finger to spread it around. And I also found that a lot of times if I leave it in the tube, it ends up drying out. And I'll take a little bit here. And I'm just going to spread it here over the surface. Even it out as much as possible. I'm going to dry off my finger on a paper towel, remove the excess silicone, and I'm going to dip it in some plain old tap water. And since the silicone is acrylic based, you can thin it out. Like so. And then once you let this sit, for thin layers, I would give it at least 6 hours. For something thick like the eyes, I'm going to wait 24 until I actually sand that, so I haven't done that yet. And then once you have it dried, like this is here, take your 600 grit sandpaper, just lightly smooth it out. So I sanded this once the silicone dried, and I went through and added a second layer of the silicone and then sanded it. And next, I'm going to take a brush and some Mod Podge, and I'm going to brush this over the entirety of the helmet. I'm going to try to put it on thick, even, and fast. Mod Podge gets tacky pretty quick, and once it gets tacky, it will retain the brushstroke marks. You'll have lines all over the helmet. Now I'm going to eventually plasti dip this and texturize it, so it's not going to matter so much, but once I apply the Mod Podge and it dries, I'm then going to prime it all gray. This is not necessary for the plasti dip, but using the Mod Podge first will help seal in the foam so the foam doesn't absorb as much of the plasti dip, and you don't have to do as many coats, which ultimately saves a lot of time because it does take a while for the plasti dip to dry in between coats. The other thing is, once it's all painted one uniform color with this gray, I will be able to see any imperfections or anything that I want to fix prior to the final plasti dip and paint. Okay, so I've gone through and done the spray painting, and I can't advise enough to use a respirator or something to protect your lungs and goggles to protect your eyes. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the way everything turned out, except this one spot right there. Gonna have to do some repair work there with the silicone and a little sanding, and then I'll head straight back to the plasti dip phase. So I've gone through here and done the first layer of plasti dip. And for anyone that hasn't used plasti dip before, it's a little different than spray paint. Whenever you're applying it to the surface of something, it builds up much more thickly and has a thick appearance to it as you're coating it. And at first this freaked me out because, I was expecting it to be more like spray paint. This runs about $5-6 a can. Most Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever you look. And the first coat I did very even. But for this next part, I'm going to be applying it a little differently. So I'm going to film this so you can see exactly what I do. And you'll notice But I have the area covered and a box here to catch the overspray. I am wearing a painter's mask that is meant for filtering out the particles from painting, and I have goggles on. I also masked my mannequin head that I have this sitting on before I started any spray painting or anything. Okay. Give you a quick close-up here and show you what I'm doing. You can see that I didn't apply it cleanly. Just kind of bubbles and pebbles up here, and that's what I'm going to do to texture it. I'm going to gradually do this, let it dry until I get a nice pebbled textured finish. Here it is after I sprayed the whole thing. You can see that texture. And this is just achieved by holding the can back a little bit more than a foot and not letting it build up as evenly and as thickly as you would do for one solid coat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry for about a half hour, and I'm going to repeat the process until the texture is a consistency which I like. Okay, so I've done several layers of the Plastidip in that same fashion, where I just let it beat up, and I just did this Rust-Oleum 2X Painter Primer, semi-gloss black, bonds to plastic. And I did the similar technique where I just let it beat up. Of course, this is too bright. It almost looks glittery or metallic in the light. So I'm going to do one final thin coat of this, and I'm hoping between the semi-gloss and the flat color that the Plastidip dries as, we'll have a nice contrast and produce a nice quality result. And here it is after all the painting and Plastidipping and texturing, etc. I'm pretty happy overall with the results and the way that it looks. And I'm probably not even going to paint or clear coat this. All such things, of course, are up to you. They're all optional. I'm going to leave it just the way it is, the Plastidip. I also like the way that it feels. Very cool. And if you've been wondering why this is left open and the chin isn't connected, that's going to be the next part. What I'm going to do now, once this sits for a little while longer, is I'm going to put Velcro. And either a strap or some elastic. It's going to Velcro this tightly to your face. So here is the finished product. I took and glued a piece of EVA foam after I measured it. See how much space I needed on my face. And then I just hot glued some Velcro to the inside of it. So whenever you take it on and off, you just open it up, squeeze your head in, and then line this up and Velcro it under your chin. Well, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and this is helpful in your own costuming ventures.